Welcome into Bayou Roar. On this episode, we are going to be finally talking about the LSU Baseball Tigers for 2026, breaking down all the position groups, pitching rotations, the strengths, the weakness of this team this year, all of those good things. But where I want to start is with the weird thing that kind of broke over the course of the weekend because we actually have some resolve to it now, and that is the CSC investigation at LSU. So if you don't know what the CSC is, the CSC is the College Sports Commission. They're not like, you know, a governing body, so to speak, over, college athletics or anything like that, but they do have the ability to do, inside looks into things and make sure people are following whatever quote unquote rules are actually out there right now for college athletics. And so the CSC was looking into a matter at LSU where it looked like they had not properly filed an NIL deal for an athlete at the school. And so, if you don't know what this means, now there is a clearinghouse that all NIL deals have to go through called NIL Go. And it has to be a certain amount. So, it's not just like, hey, you signed this deal for $100. We got to go send this into NIL Go. Hey, you signed this one for 300. It's like those kind of deals they don't necessarily look at. It's the deals that are like thousands of dollars, if not maybe like millions worth of dollars. That's got to be cleared by the NIL Go. They've got to look at it and go, okay, you know what? That looks like a legitimate deal that is worth X amount of money for them to do. It's good to go. And then they pass it along. That is kind of the new infrastructure that they have put in place to try to govern you just not writing a blank check basically anymore for a five-star athlete. Again, we know money probably still gets passed under the table, but that's what is in front of us. Well, what the CSC was looking into was that LSU had not properly filed an NIL deal for an athlete. Where this all got messy, though, was the Athletic, who was covering this story, decided on Friday evening to publish their report on the investigation. And when they published it, the image they chose to go along with the article, which did not say anything else but this, it said LSU under investigation for NIL deal through CSC or something like that. And of course, when you put the image of the LSU football helmet next to it, guess what everybody thinks? Everybody thinks, oh, it has to be with the football program. And so, of course, who was the first one to start quote tweeting, sending all this stuff out, trying to slander LSU? Ole Miss fans. And now Ole Miss fans look silly because if they had actually clicked and read the article, I mean, it's pretty early on where it says this did not have anything to do with the football program. And again, the thing is, the Athletic is behind a paywall. So the Athletic, you have to pay, X amount to read an article or whatever. And most people aren't willing to do that. They are just wanting to get the headline news and move on. And so, of course, when that all compiles together, what this is called is clickbait journalism. I went to college for journalism. I got a journalism degree. I don't work in journalism. Life brought me down a different career path. But in my journalism classes, this was the type of stuff that they told us like, hey, you know what? It's not the proper way to do things, but this is what is going to attract people to click on your stuff and watch your videos or whatever. I personally cannot stand that stuff. That's why I never try to bury the lead with stuff. I never try to put out like gotcha statements on anything I ever make content wise, just because I think that's kind of a lowbrow way to do stuff. I just do. And so, honestly, the thing that I kind of get more upset about with this whole situation is just shame on the Athletic. The Athletic is so desperate to get clicks on these articles that they're willing to throw LSU into potential hot fire with including just a simple image of the football helmet with the words LSU under investigation for NIL next to it, just so they can get more traction. And look, maybe this goes to show why you shouldn't put everything behind a paywall. I get it. People got to get, their families food on the table and stuff like that. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be paid. But again, when you put everything behind a paywall, now you're having to perform some lowbrow stuff to get people to view your content. And I just think that's just a shame that that's where we're at. But anyways, all that being said, LSU released a statement through their, I think, AD of public affairs or something like that. I don't know the proper title, but basically somebody in the building at LSU released a statement that said the investigation was done. Everything that needed to be submitted was submitted. There's not going to be any kind of penalty for LSU moving forward from all this. Everything is good. So we don't have to worry anymore about any kind of investigation, any kind of hammer being dropped. Again, the athlete was not in the football department. We don't know what department, like what sport it was or what athlete it was or whatever. But at the end of the day, this is all a moot point. There's nothing left. And so we can all move forward now with our lives, knowing that this is all good. But that was just crazy that that all got riled up on Friday evening, literally just a weird time to like have that just drop all of a sudden. But glad that it did not hurt LSU in any way, and glad that it especially did not hurt all of the awesome momentum that Lane Kiffin has had so far since he's been at the program, getting the guys that he's wanted to get out of the portal, and that they're all clean and good to go with that. So, with that being said, though, that is something I knew I'd probably needed to talk about first because that's been on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. But what we're going to do now is I'll go ahead and take our quick break just to hear from Melreg, one of our sponsors for the show. And then we will talk about some LSU baseball because the season is right around the corner and I cannot wait for it. So hang tight. We'll be back in just a second. Tiger fans, if you're looking for the best athletic apparel, then look no further than our friends over at Melreg. Melreg makes some of the best golf polos, golf pants, quarter zips, whatever you're looking for, Melreg's got it. And the best part is while at some places you're going to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on products like this, over at Melreg it is super affordable. You're going to find most things from 40 to 50 bucks. It is an absolute steal, and the best part is, if you use our code BAYOUROAR at checkout, that's BAYOUROAR at checkout, you're going to save 15% off your order. So don't delay, head on over to Melreg, that's MELREG.com today, or use the link in the show notes below. So it is finally time to talk some LSU baseball for 2026, and I could not be more excited than I am right now. Obviously, last year was awesome. You win your second championship in 4 years under Jay Johnson, and you just absolutely are on cloud nine. And you are entering this season with honestly a really good team. There's a lot of people that are out there saying right now, both in Baton Rouge radio stations, on podcasts, all these things, that this year's LSU squad could be the most talented LSU team that Jay Johnson has had. Not just in terms of the talent that's going to be out there on the field, but the depth that they have acquired as well through the transfer portal and high school signings and all that stuff. So, with that being said, that's pretty impressive considering you've had teams with Dylan Cruz, Paul Skeens. You had Tommy White for a couple years. That was really good. You obviously last year had, Cade Anderson. You had Anthony Ianson. I mean, lots of high level players that have been here the last few years. And a lot of people saying that this could be the most talented team. And so, with that being said, of course, obviously, sometimes it doesn't matter how much talent you have. If you can't put it all together, you're not going to win. But I do think this team is in a really good position to go out and compete. So on this episode, we're just going to take a look at the roster. I'm going to kind of share some guys like in the pitching staff that I think could be starters, some that will be mainly bullpen guys, kind of the strengths and weaknesses that are there. Talk about the guys that will be in the field and starting, in my opinion, and kind of share the strengths and weaknesses there. And then on another episode, maybe either later this week or at the beginning of next week, I will talk about the schedule and run through all of the series and say which ones I think they'll win, which ones I think they'll drop, all that good stuff. Because I know that would be a really long topic to talk about if we talked about that in full. But we're going to start with the roster and we're going to start with the pitching staff. And in my mind, when it comes to automatic, locked in starting pitchers for 2026 for LSU, there's only one name that we got to talk about, and that's Kason Evans. Kason Evans, in my mind, is the only person in this bullpen for LSU that is a guaranteed locked in starter for this year. Kason Evans, I don't have to oversell him to you if you're a Tiger fan. He was awesome last year. He ended up with a 5-1 record, a 2.05 ERA, in what, 52 innings pitched. He had 71 strikeouts. The dude was phenomenal. I mean, absolutely incredible last year as a true freshman. Showed early on that, I mean, he had nerves of steel when it came to just coming in and closing out games. But he also had a few starts sprinkled in there where he was just absolutely crucial. And he really held down, that bullpen a lot. People don't realize last year's bullpen featured a lot of really young guys. Not just Kason Evans. You're talking about they featured Maverick Rizzi a lot, a guy that was a freshman, William Schmidt, who was young. Like you had a lot of young arms coming out of the bullpen, and you needed reliable guys to carry you. After Anderson and Ianson had to leave the game inevitably at some point, and Evans was one of those guys that you turned to the most because he could deliver. And look, last year's LSU team was kind of, different than most college baseball teams, not just, because of the talent they had out in the field or anything like that, but because there's not a lot of college teams out there that have a lot of quality pitchers that can start for you in 2 games of a series. A lot of times the Friday night guy is the best guy that they've got. The Saturday guy is, usually good enough. And then Sunday is kind of just a wild card. But LSU was in a very rare position because Cade Anderson was awesome. But then Saturday, in game 2 of a series, you were having to face Anthony Ianson, who was also incredible. And then even on Sunday, didn't matter if it was Chase Shores, Kason Evans, whoever, you had to face another really quality arm to start on, game 3 of a series. So LSU's team last year really was different in that sense because again, not many college teams are built like that where you have multiple high level starters. And this year will be a little bit different because Kason Evans will be that lead Friday night guy, but it's like, okay, well then who's your Saturday? Who's your Sunday guy? Who's going to be the midweek starter? I don't know. That's what we got to figure out. But all I know is this: when it comes to the opening game of 2026 on Friday, next Friday, actually, Kason Evans will be the starter. And I expect him to hold that position throughout the entire season. I would be shocked otherwise. So Kason Evans, locked in starter. Now, as for other options to start, I do think there's a lot of different arms that Jay Johnson and Nate Yeske could all put together to make a starting rotation out of. And the first one to talk about is William Schmidt. William Schmidt is a guy that a lot of people really, really held a lot of value for coming out of high school. The kid's kind of long and lanky for sure, but he's got a lot of really good talent. His fastball is very, very nice. He actually, I think, had a 3-0 record last year, if I'm not mistaken, and didn't have a bad ERA. I think he had up in the fours somewhere. And honestly, a lot of people said, like we're saying last year that he was like Cade Anderson, where he just was all over the board. It felt like struggling, but Cade Anderson actually had a really, really rough year before he broke out as a star last year. 2 years ago, Cade Anderson was the guy that had like a 19 ERA or something like that, and then turned into one of the best pitchers in the country. And look, I'm not saying that William Schmidt is just going to go from being a kid that kind of struggled a little bit last year at times and, gave everybody kind of flashes of Cade Anderson style and then all of a sudden becomes an MLB prospect this year. But I do think William Schmidt has got the potential to where he could take that leap. he could take that next step forward because he did show some really good stuff. He actually was pretty consistent at throwing the ball into the strike zone and was pretty good at delivering strikes. Problem was sometimes he hung, the ball into the strike zone a little too much and people would get some good hits off of him. And he also had some walk issues, some control problems. But those are things that you can kind of fix. Talent is something that you can't just automatically fix. And that's the thing. William Schmidt has got the talent. He's got the arm talent to go out there and deliver. It's just can he put all the other surrounding pieces into place? And that will be something interesting. Some talk that I've heard from some LSU people is that they would be surprised if William Schmidt was not in the rotation of starters to at least begin the year. Now, does it stay like that? Does it change? They don't know. But there's a lot of buzz going around that William Schmidt could earn his way into a starting job, whether it is Saturday or Sunday or whatever. But that would be interesting to see because William Schmidt, again, did carry a lot of value coming out of high school. So, again, that is a name to watch. But also, they went out this season or this offseason and got proven guys from the portal too when it comes to pitchers. And one of the names that a lot of people are talking about as a guy who will more than likely be in the starting rotation is Cooper Moore. Cooper Moore is coming over from Kansas, where he was a starting pitcher for, at least I think one season out there, if not multiple. And Cooper Moore is a guy that went 7-3 last year. He had a 3.96 ERA. So again, good, especially for college pitching. That is good. He had 88 innings pitched. He had 85 strikeouts last year. So pretty solid season for Cooper Moore. Now, the thing about Cooper Moore is he doesn't have a very powerful arm. This is not a guy that's going to rely upon throwing 100 on the fastball, try to get you to chase. He is more of the type from what I have seen and what I have heard from the scrimmages they've had where he's gone out there and pitched. He's got more of an arm where he's going to throw you a lot of breaking balls. He's going to try to make you chase around the zone for stuff. And what kind of his superpower is even if he gets into a tight jam, he's got the ability to kind of get out of it. So, from a story I heard from one of the scrimmages was, he had two on with maybe one out, in an inning that he pitched, and he was able to get out of the inning without a run scored. So that is the kind of strength that Cooper Moore can give to your pitching rotation is, a guy that's a little bit different than a Kason Evans or a William Schmidt, where they've got kind of those more powerful arms where you're going to see the fastballs in the mid to upper 90s. Cooper Moore doesn't have that, but he's got a lot of different stuff that could make him a very quality pitcher. And from what I've also kind of been hearing and reading and seeing a lot is that, Jay Johnson's pretty high on Cooper Moore, and he said basically like, you don't really just go out and get a starting pitcher from another Power Four team and not really expect him to go out there and start for you. So I wouldn't be surprised if Cooper Moore ends up in the starting rotation somewhere. But again, there's just a lot of arms in the bullpen that I think could qualify for that. So I don't want to make him an automatic starter. But if I was to put a percentage behind it, I think there's like a 98.8% chance that Cooper Moore is your Saturday or your Sunday guy for sure. So pretty confident that Cooper Moore will be an option. But again, if one of these other guys that I'm about to say takes a huge leap forward, I wouldn't be shocked if they jumped him. And especially this next guy we're going to talk about, which is Jaden Newt. Now, Jaden Newt has had a very interesting career. He was a very highly coveted pitcher, when he joined LSU a couple years ago, and then had Tommy John surgery at some point, and then just things seemed to not really click into place for him. Golly, the 2023 season, he had an ERA of 27. Holy smokes. not good at all. And of course, I don't know if that's very accurate because it said he had one appearance. That's a very high number for one appearance. But Jaden Newt, man, last year was technically given a 2-1 record, had a 4.1 ERA, 32 innings pitched, had 44 strikeouts. And here's the thing with Jaden Newt. Jaden Newt has got one of those arms where, man alive, he can throw some heat. You talk about a guy that can get up into that upper 90s fastball type stuff. Jaden Newt's got some talent, and he showed a lot of flashes last year of the talent that he had. The problem is, it just felt like he was still kind of trying to piece some things together after his surgery and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, the 2024 season, he, you know, was still kind of rehabilitating from Tommy John. So, all that being said, Jaden Newt is a guy that I think Jay Johnson likes a lot, Nate Yeski likes a lot, and he could certainly end up being an option for you as a potential starter. Is it very likely? Probably not, but he's a name that I thought you should mention because, again, he was so highly coveted, before he got to LSU. And so that kind of potential doesn't just like all of a sudden just go away because you had Tommy John surgery. I mean, Kate Anderson had Tommy John surgery, and you saw what he did last year. Newt's got a ton of talent. It's just, can he put together everything finally and have some good outings? And maybe just, now that he's a little while removed from Tommy John, maybe he does finally put it all together. Now, again, am I confident he'll be a starter? Not so much, but he's a name worth talking about. And so Jaden Newt is the name that I just wanted to throw out as a starting option. Same with Devin Sheeran. Devin Sheeran is a guy that came to LSU, also very highly regarded. Now, he transferred to LSU last year, and this guy is 6'5, 255. He came over from Mount St. Mary's, where at Mount St. Mary's, he was 6-5, 4.7 ERA, and he had 109 strikeouts. Again, 109 strikeouts. And this dude, man, apparently can let it rip. I mean, this guy's got a powerful arm. He's got a lot of good stuff that a lot of people say is just, I mean, he puts in some nasty work out there on the mound. And the unfortunate thing is he tore his ACL last year before he could even really get started. And so he was out all last year, basically recovering from the ACL. But there's good things about that. One, he was very far along in his ACL recovery, where by the time you got to Omaha, there were murmurings that Sheeran could potentially suit up and go out and pitch for LSU if they absolutely needed him to. So, like, his recovery from the ACL went very, very well. So he should be fully healthy. There should be no setbacks for Sheeran entering the year. But also, the second thing I wanted to talk about with Devin Sheeran that's good about that is that it was his ACL and not anything that had to do with his arm. This had nothing to do with Tommy John surgery, nothing with shoulder, nothing with the back, nothing like that. It was his ACL. And look, ACL injuries are serious, but for a starting pitcher, for me, it's more serious. Did you have an elbow problem, a shoulder problem, something that could hinder your throwing motion? Pitching is so much about routine and rhythm. I mean, if Sheeran was not on his rhythm and his routine, that could make things really difficult for him. And again, we talk about it all the time with guys that come off of Tommy John surgery. The hardest part is just readjusting to throwing again after being out for so long and not having time to consistently throw. Sheeran could at least toss the ball, with a torn ACL. He didn't have to worry about not being able to throw it. So I like that Sheeran is not coming off of a shoulder injury or anything like that, because that means, once that knee got strengthened up, he could start throwing around again. And like we said, I mean, there was already murmurings he could have came in last year at some point. So Devin Sheeran is a guy that I really think could be up for a starting job, if he shows that he's got some really good stuff. Because again, Cooper Moore is a guy that's got a lot of Power Four starting experience and stuff like that. So like, he's probably more of a lock, but like again, that third spot, that Sunday spot is the type of spot where do you see William Schmidt? Do you see Devin Sheeran? Is that the time you kind of experiment with one of those guys that's got a lot of potential and could go out there and be a really solid starter? Because again, it's very rare for you to have more than one really good starting pitcher in college baseball. A lot of times you're very lucky if you can go past your Friday night guy and have multiple guys that are just really, really solid. And so, can you find that type of guy? And Devin Sheeran is one of those dudes that's got that kind of potential. Now, the last name I want to talk about as like a potential starting rotation option is Cooper Williams. And Cooper Williams is a name that I think holds a lot of interesting value because of two things. One, we saw him a lot last year as a freshman. We saw him a lot last year as a freshman. So that means Jay Johnson and Nate Yeske really think highly of him. He also had a 1.8 ERA. He was 0-1, 20 innings pitched, had 21 strikeouts. Now, with that being said, he also gave up 13 walks. So he had some walking issues and things like that. There were some times where I think you watched Cooper Williams and you saw the flashes of talent where you were like, holy smokes, that dude's got something there. Where, I mean, 6'4", 200 pounds. He's a solid player for sure. But you also saw some times where the moment looked a little big for him at times. But here's the thing. Again, the year two leap can always happen. You got a lot of experience under your belt. Again, he made 21 appearances on the mound last year. That's really good experience. He could be a guy that takes a step forward. And the other part about Cooper Williams that makes him interesting for this rotation is that he's a lefty. And Jay Johnson loves left-handed pitching. He loves to have a lefty, especially in the starting rotation. Think about Gage Jump. You think about Cade Anderson. It's not a rule necessarily that like you've got to have a lefty in the starting rotation under Jay Johnson. That's not like a set in stone rule. But Jay Johnson likes when he has a left-handed option available as a starter. I mean, he just does. He likes to have, a variety of different pitchers. So Cooper Williams is a guy that I think could fit, that mold of both taking a step forward in terms of talent, but also adding that lefty into the lineup that Jay Johnson likes to have a lot of times. Now, again, he's not going to be your Friday night guy like Cade Anderson was. He may not even be the Saturday guy, but he could be the Sunday guy, the game 3 guy. Who knows? But Cooper Williams is a name I think to keep an eye on. Again, the ones that I'm probably the most confident in at joining Case and Evans is William Schmidt and Cooper Moore. But again, I think there's a lot of arms. And here's the other cool part about this. I mean, we're talking about what is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that could potentially be competing for 2 more starting spots. I mean, it doesn't matter who you add to the lineup. 3 of these guys are going to be in your bullpen as guys that will eat up a lot of heavy innings. So that's the great strength of this is you've got potentially 5 other guys to add into the starting rotation. And then once you settle on the other 2, the other 3 are free to use in the bullpen whenever you want. So I love that advantage for LSU. Now, there's also some guys that are, in my opinion, going to be just mainly your bullpen options, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing either. A lot of times, people think you got to have all these studs in the bullpen to go out there and win. Well, at the college level, here's the thing. You don't always need a Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson to come out of your bullpen. Maybe those are bad examples because they were both really, really good starters. But like Case and Evans, you don't have to have a Case and Evans coming out of your bullpen every single week to be successful. sometimes you just need some guys that can go out there and eat a few innings and get you to the next guy. Maybe one of your starters struggles more than you think, and you got to pull him a little bit early, and it gets you off your game plan a little bit. Well, you go throw one of these guys in there, throw a couple innings, and then you kind of get back, hopefully, on track. And here's the thing, these guys that I'm about to read off to you, they're not bad options by any means. They're just guys that I don't think are going to be in the starting rotation. Now, they could be a midweek starter for you. Same with any of the other guys that don't make the starting rotation. You could see them be, the midweek game starter for LSU. But these are really solid options. And the first one I want to talk about is Zach Cowan. I think for a lot of people, Zach Cowan might be a guy that it's surprising that, like I didn't mention, as a starting option for LSU. But here's the thing with Zach Cowan. I love Zach Cowan. I think he is a really, really good pitcher. You saw him last year. 3-3 was his total, 2.9 ERA coming out of the bullpen. And that's mostly as a closer. He had 60 strikeouts to only 12 walks a year ago. And when he was a starter at Wofford, had 124 strikeouts and only 29 walks in the season that he was their primary Friday night starter. So Zach Cowan is a very, very good pitcher. That's not what I want to get twisted here. I think very highly of Zach Cowan. The problem is, I've seen Zach Cowan play a lot. I mean, he made what, 22 appearances last year at the plate or on the mound. And you know what I saw? A guy that's got really good stuff in terms of like his off speed stuff, but he doesn't have a very powerful arm. He just doesn't. He doesn't have a powerful arm. Now that does not mean he cannot be an effective pitcher, but I think the thing you saw was the more film that came out on Zach Cowan over the course of the year, the more teams started to realize kind of what he wanted to do on the mound. And if he had to go more than maybe twice through the lineup, well, you started to see guys kind of start to hone in on Zach Cowan's pitching and take advantage of that. Now, again, Zach Cowan could take another leap forward, another year at a Power Four program like LSU. You're working with Nate Yeske for another year. You're in there with a lot of really good competition. Maybe he does progress a little bit more. Problem is I just don't know at this point with Cowan being a what? I mean, I don't know if he's a fifth year senior, but he's a senior. With him being a senior at this point, I think we've seen what Zach Cowan is as a pitcher. And I think there's a reason why he didn't go to the MLB last year, despite being a really good closer for LSU. And I think it's because he doesn't have necessarily MLB level stuff to his pitching, but he is a very effective college pitcher. So again, I think Zach Cowan is going to be your primary closer once again this year. And I am very, very good with that. I feel very, very great with the notion of having Zach Cowan as my closing pitcher once again. My thing is, I just don't think he's quite to a starting level. So I think you'll see him a lot coming out of the bullpen. Just don't expect him to be the starter, maybe outside of a midweek start every now and again. But Zach Cowan, I mean, great option, great option. But this next guy is also an interesting option because a year ago he was supposed to be your midweek starter, and that's Gavin Guidry. Gavin Guidry was a guy that, again, very highly regarded by this LSU staff. In 2022 to 2023, he was 3-0, 3.7 ERA in 23 appearances, 42 strikeouts, 12 walks. And then in 2023 to 2024, 2-0, 2.59 ERA, had 36 strikeouts and 18 walks. And Gavin Guidry's got a lot of really good stuff. I mean, he does. It's not, anything that just absolutely jumps out at you to where you go, wow, Gavin Guidry is absolutely letting it rip. But he was the closer in Omaha when you won the 2023 championship. And he's got a lot of really good experience. The problem was last year he had a back injury and it just never got better. It was something they thought maybe he could get over. Everybody kept asking, is he close to being back? And then it just never happened. But from what I have heard from, fall camp and the scrimmages that they've had the last couple of weeks, Gavin Guidry has looked really, really solid and kind of back into form. The problem is I don't think you just automatically throw a guy that had a back injury last year and had to have surgery on it back into a starting role right away. I think he maybe is a guy that you warm up a little bit and you get him to a spot where he could maybe be your midweek starter or something like that. But I don't think Gavin Guidry is anywhere close to being a regular starter for you, especially on the weekend, given that he's coming off of a serious injury like that. And then also, I think just Gavin Guidry overall, while he's a solid pitcher, I don't think he holds, necessarily like a candle to the potential talent that you're going to see in that rotation with guys. I mean, think about if Devin Sheeran is in the bullpen, not a starter, but just a heavy bullpen guy. Devin Sheeran's got a lot of more of a high ceiling to me than like Gavin Guidry does. So, like, why would I, put Gavin Guidry ahead of Devin Sheeran? If we're stacking up the options here, I wouldn't. And so Gavin Guidry, again, I think will be a very pivotal part of this bullpen because he's got experience. He's got some really solid stuff. And I think he'll do just fine. I just don't think he's quite ready to be a starter, but he will be a heavy, heavy hand in your bullpen this season. So I love Gavin Guidry. I do. I think he's impressive, but he's got some work to do to get back. Now, this next name I'm going to bring up as another heavy bullpen guy that you're going to see this year, Maverick Rizzi. Oh man, I love me some Maverick Rizzi. Just that name alone, Maverick Rizzi. That is such a great name. But this dude, of course, 6'9, 251. Last year, you saw him 24 times, had a 4.7 ERA, had 29 strikeouts and 19 walks. So obviously, had some growing pains as a freshman. But from what I have seen and heard, he has put in a lot of work over the offseason and he has looked awesome. And look, he had some really impressive stuff. This is a guy that can rip the ball into the upper 90s. I mean, he's got a powerful arm. And a lot of with taller pitchers, from what Ben McDonald said a lot last year on broadcast of LSU games, because he's a taller pitcher, he said, a lot of times it's mechanics with these taller pitchers because you have to be very consistent in your pitching motion. It's harder for guys that are tall. So, like, that's why Chase Shores a lot of times kind of struggled at times with his consistency, was because he was like what, 6'8", and he was having to constantly like get himself back into the same motion. But you saw Chase Shores by Omaha finally kind of start to get that rhythm down, and he really became awesome for you throughout the postseason. So now with another year of work, another offseason of work, I think Maverick Rizzi can take a huge step forward. Not enough to maybe compete for a starting spot, but man alive, is he going to play a lot coming out of the bullpen this year for LSU baseball. So love Maverick Rizzi. I think he's a guy that's definitely going to get a lot of looks this year. And the last guy that I want to kind of seriously talk about as a guy that will play kind of a heavy-handed role in the pitching rotation out of the bullpen is Santiago Garcia. Santiago Garcia is a guy that's coming over from Oregon where he was 3-0, had a 4.2 ERA, had 40 strikeouts and 19 walks. Now, he is a left-handed pitcher. And again, Jay Johnson loves to have left-handed pitchers, both in the starting lineup and in the rotation for matchup purposes. And Santiago Garcia is a guy that I think definitely has a lot of value. I think he was very highly regarded coming over from Oregon, coming out of high school. I mean, he was a he was a very coveted guy. He was in the top 100 college transfers for this past season. I think he was number 38. He's also in the top 50 transfer pitchers, according to D1 Baseball. So, yeah, this is a guy that a lot of people liked coming out of the portal, and Jay was able to go get him. And I think it's going to be really, really cool to see how Santiago kind of works his way through the rotation. But again, with not like a whole lot of really proven quality lefties, to work with in the bullpen, Santiago Garcia and Cooper Williams are going to get a lot of work. So, I hope that they both work out really well, but those are kind of your more left-handed pitching options. Now, some other names just to think about as we head into the season, I won't break them down a whole lot. Dax Dath is a guy that a lot of people are talking about as a guy that, you know, has a lot of potential. Danny Lockenmeyer is coming over from North Dakota State, and he is another lefty. Had a good season at North Dakota State, but again, you're taking a leap up in competition. What does that kind of look like? That will be a guy to keep your eye on because if he hits, could be really good, especially being a lefty, could be really good to add him in. You've got Connor Binge coming back for another year, and Binge started out really good coming over from DBU. He had a couple really nice performances, but then once we got into conference play a year ago, Binge really fell off. So where does Binge fall in all that? That's going to be interesting to see. Grant Fontenot is a guy that has just been a very loyal LSU Tiger. And if there's one thing that Jay Johnson has kind of proved, is that he likes to be loyal to the guys that are loyal to him. And so I'm very interested to see how much time Grant Fontenot gets out of the bullpen. Because he was a guy that last year I felt like there was just times where I was like, oh, bless him, he shouldn't be out there right now. But there was other times he showed some flashes of some real talent. So that will be interesting. And then finally, Marcos Paz. Marcos Paz is a freshman that if he hadn't gotten Tommy John surgery late into high school, he probably would not be at LSU, just being completely honest. But Marcos Paz is coming in as a true freshman, as a guy that a lot of people are absolutely salivating over as a pitching prospect. This is a guy that's got pretty much everything you want. And he could absolutely light it on fire out of the bullpen if he can hit it early. And that's the thing. Can you get a repeat of like a Case and Evans situation where you've got another awesome freshman arm that can come out of your bullpen and deliver? I don't know. But Marcos Paz, according to a lot of people, has got a ton of potential. And so that is a guy that I'm really looking forward to seeing how he plays throughout the course of the year to see if he adds something really, really good. So, all in all, I think kind of the cool thing with this bullpen that I see as a strength is all of the guys with very high ceilings. Again, we've talked about a lot of names here, and some of them you've seen. So, like, hey, Maverick Rizzi's got a really high ceiling. Hey, Devin Sheeran, we haven't seen him, but he's got a really high ceiling. And Jaden Newt puts it all together. I mean, the sky could be the limit for Jaden Newt. There's a lot of guys in this bullpen, even a guy like Marcos Paz coming in as a true freshman that could be absolutely incredible. And you could see them really shine this year for LSU, this season. But the kind of the biggest weakness with this group that obviously like, you know, you didn't really have last year was you don't really have those guys that you feel absolutely 100% certain that they can go out there and do really, really well. Now, of course, you were taking a risk on Ianson last year. You're taking a risk, honestly, on Cade Anderson, taking that leap forward. And you took a risk on Chase Shores coming off of Tommy John to really put it together. But the thing is, you saw some of their stuff and you said, okay, I think that's going to be really, really good. Problem is here is, okay, will this all work out? And look, I trust Nate Yeske and I trust Jay Johnson to kind of put together and formulate a plan that will work. But there's just a lot of inexperience in this group. And there's a lot of just uncertainty on how this will all come together. And so, again, I don't think this is a bad pitching core by any means. There's a lot of names on this list that I'm excited to watch. But it's just, can they piece that all together? We'll have to see. So that's the kind of the pitching lineup, the pitching rotation. I know I talked a while on that, but that is probably one of the most interesting storylines is how do you recover from Cade Anderson and Anthony Ianson departing? But we'll take another just quick break here, and then I'll come right back and talk about the field because I think that will go a lot faster. All right, so now we turn our attention to the rest of the lineup. Who's playing in the field? Who will be going up to bat for the Tigers in 2026? And this will go a lot faster because we know a lot more of these guys. And know for sure where they're locking down their positions. And honestly, the outfield, it's stacked. I mean, it's three of the same guys you had pretty much all season last year, and they're just running it back for another year. So you got Derek Curiel that's going to be making the move to center. And look, Curiel is incredible. He was so good last year as a freshman. Now apparently he's added on a little bit more muscle. He's hitting the ball with a little bit more power. And for a guy that hit, I mean, like 375 or something like that, had a really long hit streak, even into SEC play. You feel great about the fact that that kid can now add on a little bit more power and start to maybe hit it out the yard a little bit more. So Derek Curiel, no concerns there. He's going to be awesome. Same with right field, Jake Brown. Jake Brown's incredible. He really should have been probably your starting right fielder all year last year. And I know there's a lot of LSU baseball coverage that emphasize that point a lot, but it's the truth. I mean, Jake Brown is a very, very good outfielder. But again, I get why Jay Johnson was playing Josh Pearson so much because he was very loyal to Josh Pearson. Pearson made some really awesome plays, especially in the 2023 championship season and all that stuff. So, like, I get why Jay was loyal to him, but Jake Brown is a guy that is phenomenal. And he should be your everyday right fielder along with Curiel every day at center. That, I mean, that's going to be incredible. And left, same thing. Chris Stanfield will now move over to left field, giving way for Curiel to take over at center. And again, this outfield is going to be fast. They are going to be phenomenal in terms of just coverage and getting to the ball. It's going to be very hard to get a hit on this outfield unless you're just dropping it right in front of them on just short little bloops or something like that because Stanfield has got speed for days, and now he's going to be covering left. Curiel's an incredible MLB level talent that's going to be covering center, and Jake Brown's another MLB level talent that's going to be covering right. Like, you feel great about this entire outfield. I don't have to oversell them to you. This is going to be an incredible outfield, an outfield honestly stacked with talent that I feel like, not that LSU's been just missing, but like to have three guys of this high quality in the same outfield is incredible. So again, just kind of reflects, especially some of like the Maneri days, where I mean, you basically had three center fielders out there playing coverage. I don't know if all these guys would be center fielders in the MLB, but they're really good. And the best part is Stanfield can hit well. He can get on base very well, and Jake Brown has shown he can hit homers. He can hit against, you know, lefties. He can hit against righties. He's a good hitter as well. You can get good hits from all these guys too. So feel really good about the outfield. And catcher, we know for sure who that's going to be too. That's Cade Aaron Beatty. There's really not competition for this year. I mean, it's basically just Cade Aaron Beatty and then a freshman and Omar Cerna, who has got a lot of scouts on his side because he has got a lot of really good potential for the MLB. But from what I've heard and from some of the things that I've read, it just seems like Cerna is going to need some time to develop. But here's the thing, that's what Cade Aaron Beatty was last year. Aaron Beatty was a guy that came in as a very highly touted prospect. And he struggled a little bit off and on early on, when he would make some appearances at the plate, and behind the plate on defense. But I mean, eventually down the line, you saw Aaron Beatty get a lot more comfortable, both on defense, but also hitting homers, even against Arkansas, who had a really great pitching rotation last year. Very, very good team. I mean, showed some power, showed some really good skill. From what I've heard and some of the clips I've seen as well online, looks like Aaron Beatty has continued to progress very, very far forward. The only thing is when will you get him some time to rest? Will you trust Cerna enough to play the midweek? Because that's kind of what helped Cade Aaron Beatty develop a lot was being the midweek catcher. Do you turn to a guy like Eddie Yaman, who was a catcher at a different level of baseball, also a first base option? Do you turn to Eddie Yaman at some point to let him be a guy? I don't know. But Cade Aaron Beatty will probably be anchoring the catcher position. That much we know. And then, of course, kind of the last spot that is a guaranteed lock is shortstop, and that's Stephen Milam. Monster Milam returns. We know the dude can hit from either side. He hits well. He's a defensive, just masterpiece at the shortstop position. You don't have anything to worry about at short with Steven Milo. But it's the rest of the infield that LSU is going to have to figure out. And you're having to cover this hurdle of last year you had the best fielding team in LSU baseball history. And look, Daniel Dickinson, phenomenal, phenomenal. As much as Michael Braswell struggled hitting the ball last year for some reason, I don't know why he dropped off so badly in terms of his offense, but Michael Braswell was a phenomenal defensive glove. I mean, that much for sure at third base. Michael Braswell was your ultimate glove there. And you saw once it got to Omaha time, that's really all that had to matter to Jay was that Michael Braswell was your best defender at third base. And he just had to be that guy. So you're having to replace those guys. Also, Bear Jones, can't forget about him at first. Really solid first baseman for you. So you're having to replace a lot of parts in the infield. But the core thing is you've got Milam at short to kind of help piece them all together. And at third base, it really looks like it's kind of a battle with Trent Caraway as the leader for that. Trent Caraway is coming over from Oregon State, where he was a really solid player. And he's a guy that a lot of people are pretty much starting to pencil in, at least, as the guy who will be the third base starter. He's got some good power behind him. I think he'll have to take a minute to adjust to SEC pitching as compared to where he was previously. But he's got a good glove from the things that I have seen and the reports that have been coming out. Defensively, he's done really well. Just batting, he's had to try to kind of keep up a little bit with. But he's a guy that probably will be the third base starter and should be really solid. Not to probably like Michael Braswell levels, but he should be really good for you out there at third. Now, the only other guy I could see maybe fighting for a spot there is John Pearson, the little brother of Josh Pearson. And apparently he has slimmed down a little bit, which is something they worked with him on this past offseason. He would be a bigger third base option for sure. But you've seen that work out before with Tommy White, and that turned out to be pretty good. Pearson's biggest draw is his power. And that's why John Pearson could end up being a DH option for you, honestly, because he's providing a lot of power into the lineup when he's inserted. You saw that last year as a freshman. There was times he'd get a hold of one and he'd take it the distance or got really close to it. So John Pearson is definitely a guy that could compete for third base. Seems like it's Caraway's position to lose, though. But keep an eye on that one. Maybe not as much, though, as second base, because second base is where it's kind of a wide open competition. You got Tanner Reeves, who was a third base rotation guy last year with Michael Braswell, and you've got Seth Dardar, who is coming over from Kansas State. Now, from the reports that I've been seeing, Reeves, much like when he was at third base last year, is a little bit up and down. With Reeves, you've got a good bat. Like Reeves can hit with some power behind it. He's got, some good offensive tools. It's just it seems like he really kind of is up and down in the field. And he's a very good athlete. Jay really likes him a lot. But again, he's a little bit inconsistent when it comes to his defense sometimes. As compared to Seth Dardar, who again maybe is a guy that doesn't necessarily hit the ball super well, but he's got some very good defensive prowess to him. In my opinion, if Reeves can put it all together once it gets time to play out on the field, I think this will be Reeves' spot to hold on to. But the problem is what we saw last year is, yeah, you may have a guy who doesn't hit the ball super well, but man, if he adds defensive value, especially to an infield that's got so much turnover to it, I think Jay will probably roll with Dardar more because of the glove that he will provide more than the offensive hitting. Because here's the thing, in a lineup that's going to feature Curiel, Brown, Stanfield, who can all hit, Cade Beatty, who can hit, Stephen Milam, who can hit, Trent Caraway, a guy that once he kind of gets going should be able to hit. And then the guy we're going to talk about for first base, Zach York, probably going to be able to provide some power hitting as well. I think you could be okay with a liability on offense if you had to, aka pretty much what you were relying upon with, Michael Braswell a year ago. So With that being said, right now my lean is towards Tanner Reeves just because Jay has shown so much just admiration for him from last year and even going into this year. But I wouldn't be surprised if at some point Seth Dardar just kind of takes that leap over him and ends up being your second baseman for the remainder of the year. But we'll just have to see because, again, it won't really be until the first kind of big tournament that they play that we're really going to see what kind of feel this team has when they start playing some kind of quote unquote real competition. Here's the thing, it's hard to gauge any team in the first couple weeks because they're playing all of these really small schools while the weather's bad, while they know they can just out talent these guys. Like, it's once you start playing in these tournaments and start going into some better weather that you start to see what these teams are really made of. So it might be Reeves for the first 3 weekends, but then you kind of see a shift at some point. But all that being said, second base will be a coin flip between those two, but it will be one of those two, I think. And then at first base, it looks like this is pretty much locked down. But again, does Eddie Yaman play a factor? I don't know. That's Zach York. Zach York is the big boy transfer coming over from, I believe it was Grand Valley State. I'm going to look it up for sure, though. And man, though, this dude here, he's going to be fun to watch for LSU this year again. For sure, a lot of people bringing up Cade Beloso type comparisons here. Could it be another Cajun Bambino for you? Of course, I don't think Cade was this big of a guy, but Zach York, he's about 6'2", 295. And man, does this dude got some power behind him. So he comes over from Grand Canyon. That's where it was, where he hit 368, 285, 339. How about the home runs? 8, 11, and 13. Dude's got some really good power behind him for sure, and he should add some of that into the lineup. Now, the thing with Zach York is, even though he is 6'2", 295, a lot of people are reporting like he's actually very nimble for his size. Like, he doesn't let that size slow him down in the field. So that's good that you're not really losing any kind of defensive prowess with him. And first base, he won't have to do anything too crazy over at first, but he should be really solid there. And again, if he can provide some power into this lineup, that will be awesome. Last year, LSU's team was kind of carried by Bear Jones having to hit one out of the park every now and again, an occasional home run here and there from a couple guys. Daniel Dickinson, I think you saw kind of towards the end of the year finally start to kind of spike up a little bit in terms of his home runs. But last year wasn't a team that necessarily hit for yard a lot. But this is a lineup where I think you could see a lot of guys maybe not hit 20 plus home runs, but, add in maybe 10 here, 11 there, kind of be collectively as a unit a better hitting lineup overall. So again, Zach York, I think if he can provide you those 13 home runs that he did for Grand Canyon, I think you feel really great about that. But another thing I've heard about Zach York that I'm really looking forward to seeing is that not only can he hit for that power, he's also very controlled at the plate. Like, he's not afraid to take his time as well and be patient for it to kind of come to him rather than chasing. So I think that will be a good thing for this LSU lineup as well, that you got a guy that can hit for that power, but also a guy that's also going to be able to work the count if he needs to. Now, a couple others just named to watch. Braden Simpson is a guy that's coming over from, not from the high school ranks, I believe JUCO, and he's coming in from the transfer portal. And this is a guy that has a lot of potential as an infielder. Now, where he will land as an infielder, whether it's first base option, a second base option, who knows? But Braden Simpson is a guy that's got a lot of talent behind him. A lot of people seem to think very highly of him as a guy that, could be a big X factor on this defense if he can get it all together. So I'll be interested in seeing Braden Simpson. I think Daniel Harden is another name to watch for, obviously in a outfield as crowded as LSU's is in terms of talent with the three guys that got out there. Daniel Harden is an outfielder that is very highly regarded too. But I think he will be a guy that you'll see kind of rotate around just to give somebody a breather, just to give Stanfield a game off, or to give Jake Brown a game off, or, let Stanfield move to center and Harden play left field while Derek Couriel gets a game off. Something like that. I feel like that's kind of the role Daniel Harden will play, but I think that will be a very valuable role, especially for, again, trying to keep up stamina for hopefully another run in Omaha this upcoming summer. So Daniel Harden's another name to keep your eye on. Mason Braun, as a freshman, is another name to kind of keep your eye on, particularly at the DH spot. I think when it comes to the DH spot, John Pearson will probably get a lot of looks, but Mason Braun is a guy that from the things that I heard, apparently he was at the MLB Combine like jacking up bombs over at the MLB Combine, hitting for like 450 or something ridiculous like that. Like, so if he can come in with that power at the DH spot as a freshman and get some big knocks like that, you'll feel pretty good about that. But Mason Braun is a very highly regarded freshman that I think could get some looks, especially at DH this season. Or again, maybe if he plays first base, he gives Zach York a breather every now and again, get some playing time out there. Mason Braun is a guy to definitely keep your eye on. And then the last guy is Jack Ruckert. Jack Ruckert is a shortstop prospect. Again, just people are drooling over the potential this kid's got. And of course, the hard part is you got Stephen Milam playing short, and he's not going to probably move off that spot. I would assume the only way Stephen Milam moves at all is if just second base is absolutely atrocious and you need him to go do that, and you throw Ruckert in at shortstop, hoping he can kind of be a solid freshman for you out in the field like Milam was a couple years ago. Maybe not at short, but maybe Ruckert plays second. I don't know. But all that being said, Ruckert has got just talent drooling. I mean, oozing out of him. And that is a guy that, I mean, just everybody's excited to see play. Again, it's probably just going to have to be more in the midweek than anything else because you've got a pretty set lineup everywhere else. But as for this team as a whole, man, again, the rest of this team is so talented. I think that's what gives a lot of LSU fans a lot of hope for this season is not just, you got a really solid pitching core to work with. But I mean, man, you look at this lineup and again, you're pretty much set in your outfield, your catcher, your shortstop, pretty much got your first base locked down. It's really second base. You've got to really figure out. And then third base, you kind of have a lead candidate for. And you've got some talented guys behind them as well that could also play a factor. So that's what gives a lot of excitement for this year is that this is a very talented lineup from top to bottom. It's not going to be easy to poke holes, in a lot of places. Now, the strength of this team, I think, will be the outfield. I think the outfield will be probably the best part of the remainder of this lineup because those are three guys that are just incredible. And I think the weakness here will be potentially the gelling of, your infield. How quickly can those guys gel and get a rhythm and some timing together? That's kind of the biggest concern with this year's team is how quickly will those guys kind of get it together. So that will be the interesting thing to watch. But all in all, this is an exciting team, a team that could easily put it all together and make another run. So, like I said, on our next episode, whenever that is, whether it's later this week or next week, we will go through the schedule and I'll share my thoughts on every series, whether or not they'll win or not. But as for now, I think you should be excited. This team's got a lot of good stuff going for it. And again, we're almost just about a week away from this season kicking off. So, we're really close to that. So make sure you're following along. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe, wherever you get your podcast from. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Really excited about this baseball season and what's coming up for those Tigers. Obviously, keeping up with women's hoops still, which is getting some big wins right now over some more opponents. They'll have a big matchup coming up with Texas here in a few days. But for now, that's where we're going to leave it. And so thank you guys so much for following along. If you would, please make sure to share this with your friends, wherever you get your podcast from. It really help us out a lot. And until next time, I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And let's go Tigers.